Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions. Your host, Bryan. We're going to wrap up today with a special selection, which is where one of you tell me exactly what it is I need to check out. Today's comes at us from Mark. You recently did Rimsky-Korsakov's Scheherazade. There are several reactions of this live Carnegie Hall version, but I like the fidelity of the remastered album version. I recommend note-taking given the length. Hope you enjoy. All right, we do have something that is 25 minutes long here. Looking by this album art, I'm thinking we're going to be looking at something in the progressive folk, maybe progressive folk rock area. I'm excited for it though. Let's dive into it. I am going to be taking notes. And Genius, I went and looked ahead of time because I did see that despite it just being called Song of Scheherazade, on Deezer it has all 9 movements listed as subtitles, which just took up so much space. I just manually edited it down to this, but I do have timestamps for all of the movements, which is going to help me divide up my thoughts a little bit. So let's dive into this. See what Renaissance is bringing to the table today. So this is the fanfare, and yeah, true to form. Harmonically kind of moving in, it's not circles, but it isn't very directioned either. This is the second movement, Betrayal. So a short-lived 3 into this 4. Very abrupt, digging that. It's very playful, lots of sounds everywhere. It's kind of fun for a betrayal, right? Okay, yeah, dude, this is a fun betrayal. Strong bass work here as well. After all that rising energy, we kind of mellowed it out a little bit. The strings giving us this tremolo over here keeps the intensity there. Adventure, victory. Soft tones of loss, but not sadness. We are now in the third movement, the Sultan. Still 4. Cool little bit of tension on that melody line. There's so many instruments. Vocal harmonies, always get behind that. Soft drums here too. Choir. I like how so much of this is led by the bass and the drums. The choir, the flutes, the woodwinds, they're all sort of ornamental. The vocals are lead, but the bass and the drums are the driving force of all of this. Lots of little ornamental ideas. I love it. The little swirling woodwinds too. I'm having such a tough time getting a read on this section though. Like emotionally, what's the storytelling here? I will say a lot of this is rather smooth though, even in the darker sections, the heavier sections. And I say heavy from like a harmonic area, not necessarily a production size. That piano just keeps going. Now we're in the love theme. Oh, those are gorgeous. Kind of jazzy. Maybe loungy would be the right word. Those little runs. It's a romantic feeling though. Light, bubbly, quickly paced, dexterous, but harmonically incredibly positive. Yeah, we got some horn. It's almost whimsical. I think a really good description for a lot of this track so far has been subtlety. Nothing musically, melodically, harmonically has really been in your face. I appreciate that. There's a lot of restraints on this to make sure it's just what it needs to be without, shooting past the goal, so to speak. We've moved into the fifth movement, the Young Prince. That's a double read. And a harp. I love the bass doing texture layering with the vocals. That last section felt very, a little bit here too, very springtime. But that uplift was really well done. Dude, the bass just continues to lead this whole song.
He would vow to love her for the rest of all his days.
Oh, big leap there. Fantastic vibrato. Just landed on that pitch. That was wonderful. Movement 6, Festival Preparations. Getting a lot of like morning vibes here. Sun coming over the horizon kind of deal. Beginnings, maybe. Very bouncy. I could see this in a musical number or preparing for a festival. Everybody just joyous, getting ready. Tensions are high as everything needs to be perfect. Final rehearsals are going on for the performance arts. Yeah. It also sounds like a really good ensemble song. It reminds me of the town song at the beginning of Beauty and the Beast. You're kind of getting all these different voicings from all over the place, and all these instruments are kind of doing their own thing while being part of this larger song. But it's fun, it's bouncy. Ooh, higher tension here. Is that a harp or a guitar over there? It's a nice little addition. All right, next movement here, Fugue for the Sultan. A fugue is a musical device. We should hear a lot of theme and variation going on here between generally just a few instruments. Very cool. Are those the same core notes? I think I kind of lost how this relates to the theme, but I can. This is the festival. It's neat to hear the fugue turn into the opening of this festival line.
Scheherazade, this day is yours. Bearers of your gifts now all around you stand.
No bass yet.
Finest silk made in the land is waiting for your choice. It shimmers at your hand.
That's a fun little riff there.
Scheherazade, your life is one you have today. The sultans of the people watch you step into the sun.
Got some timpani off to the side.
Of every kind, food piled high on woven leaves for all to eat. Drums and flutes at every turn, music winding, twisting through the crowded streets.
Yeah.
Caravans from far away repeat
That got really groovy.
to see the sultan in Baghdad today.
The nice not levity, the weight of the situation emphasized by the timpani over here.
Tale is told, the sultan let her life be spared. The festival begins this day to celebrate her fame. The people sing her praise. Stories sung, the crowds are dancing to the music and the entertainment. All the voices sing, the people call to see the king. The sultan smiles, the story's just begun.
Yeah, cool syncopation.
The sultan and Scheherazade are one.
Oh, this is the finale. This is the last 2 minutes.
Scheherazade, Scheherazade.
The choir is really filling out the space here. The brass helping that as well. This is just a big moment.
Told in tales of sultans, talismans and rings. 1,001 nights she sang to entertain her king. She said,
Swirling vortex woodwinds. This is from earlier in the song, actually. Love the power of the brass over here. Oh. That stuff right there. Ooh. Uncertainty? No, not for the punctuation. Okay. I what I heard there was like a trumpet coming in soft with the octave on that final note, just kind of hitting that T, that the very tip of that chord, and punctuating that finale. They didn't go for it. That's fine. Strong resolution, anyways. Now, here's the thing. I get the feeling that somewhere at the core of this is a rock band. Drum kit, bass guitar show up quite frequently, and we do have acoustic guitar every once in a while. I think I heard an electric guitar in there, but given how muted most of the instruments are, it if it was an electric guitar, it didn't carry the general bite that I expect from rock guitars. Even of an older era, when was this? I'm thinking 70s, maybe. Uh, that can't be right. 2022? 1975. There we go. I was like, there's no. The expanded edition released in 2022, some sort of. Oh, that's the remaster. Okay. Yeah, the original was 1975, which checks out for me a lot more than 2022 does. But there is a general rock band at the beginning or at the core of this. And I think with so many sections being led by the bass guitar, that is a clear signifier to me because generally there's a lot of orchestral stuff going on in here. And there are a couple of more folkier leanings at times. I don't really hear too much rock composition in here. In fact, a lot of this just kind of speaks to me as modern classical. A little dash of romantic era in here, but more of a modern take on it. And you don't really hear a lot of electric bass guitar in classical music. The drum kit as well. An orchestral snare and an orchestral bass drum sound different. We do have timpanis in here, which kind of are in the same realm as the toms on a drum kit. And I like the inclusion of them. Timpanis just sound great. There's a nice majestic largeness to them. They just sound powerful. So I'm glad they were included in the places they were. But, you know, the drum kit and the electric bass, you're just not going to hear that a lot. So this tells me that Renaissance is probably a prog rock band. And what I think stands out to the most is that there's just not rock in here, really. This is like orchestral music, classical music written for an orchestra that happens to have a drum kit and a bass guitar and somewhere, sometimes, possibly an electric guitar. And I really like that. It hits me in a very specific way. Because I've mentioned in the past, you know, we've listened to symphonic rock, we've listened to symphonic metal, and you know, it's usually metal with a dash of classical or metal with the sounds of a symphony. That at the end of the day, at the heart of it, it's still just rock or metal music with some expanded instrumentation. And I really want that extra side to it. This kind of goes in the opposite direction. This is classical music with a hint or a flavor of rock to it. I do wish that I could find stuff that's more synergistic between the two sides. And we have heard some really cool stuff like Seven Spires. And I'm blanking out on another one, but I just, they're one of my most listened to albums last year. Stardust. There we go. Merging rock and metal realms with the classical realm and finding a middle point rather than leaning one way or the other. This definitely leans a lot more towards the classical side, but I do really like seeing presumably a rock band write strong classical music. I think that's very cool because too often, as I mentioned, it's rock music with a little bit of like strings in it or a little bit of, orchestral spice. not necessarily involving a lot of classical composition into the mix. So I do like seeing this. And I think this song does a fantastic job of honestly what classical music does well, which is explores nuance. This is incredibly nuanced on so many different levels. I mean, just right from the start, instrumentation. We got timpani, we got cymbals, we have the drum kit, we have bass, we have harp in here, we have all sorts of woodwinds. We had, I believe, an oboe solo. Definitely sounded double reeded, but I couldn't quite pinpoint the specific double reeded instrument it was. Anyways, it sounded great. Love the tone of that. But there's also flutes in here, clarinets. We have horns like tubas and French horns specifically. I think I heard a trumpet, but it didn't show up as much as the other two brass instruments. Strings, dude. We got violins all over the place. We have a cello. We have choirs. We have two lead vocalists, one masculine, one feminine. And and the cool thing is, what I always bring up when we have these larger ensembles of instruments is many of them are going to fill the same role. The timpanis, the tubas, the bassoons, the bass guitar, they're all low-end instruments. They can all be used in a very similar way. But they all have different timbres, different textures, and you're going to use the one that you need for this specific moment. Different instruments are going to fit different vibes better because of the way the instrument sounds, not so much of the range of the instrument. And unlike rock, where your bass guitar is your only low-end instrument, you can remove some of these instruments in places, or only add them in other places, or bring them together for a big finale. And I love how this song continues to evolve and develop with all these instruments coming in and leaving. And even when you have multiple instruments in the same like pitch range, you can still have them playing off of each other. Have the violins do a little ornamental doodle-doo, and then the flutes come over here doodle-doo, and they're almost in conversation against the harmony that's being developed on the chordal area, the melody that's being developed, the rhythmic element. You have this little conversation fluttering around, and it's just very fun. I think the best showcasing of this was the festival prep section. And that was just a joy to listen to. Very bouncy, but also incredibly layered. So many additional ornamental ideas being peppered around that track, while the core melody and rhythm are progressing the song forward. And yeah, dude, I'm a big fan of larger groups of instrumentation and removing instruments and adding them in different places to achieve different vibes, atmospheres, textures, feelings. Just yes, it's one of, I think, the shortcomings of smaller groups, whether it be a string trio or a rock band. You just don't have that option really at most times to allow some instruments to just rest and take the moment off because they're not needed for this specific vibe. And this song has a lot of vibes, honestly. Every section of it, every movement has its own unique identity. I don't think many of these would be confused. Movement 3's Sultan shares some elements with Movement 9's finale. And I think a lot of that comes down to simply revisiting something from the past to tie things up, to kind of give it this, not necessarily a cyclical element, but to put the bow on this proverbial box and wrap it all up nicely rather than allowing it to continue to be linear. Other than that, I don't think I hear too many callbacks here. Most of these songs have their own atmospheric flair to them. Not to say that it's totally disjointed. Much of the transitional work between ideas and movements is solid. For being 9 sections within 25 minutes of music, honestly, it went by incredibly quickly, but also, if I didn't have the minute markers to know when we changed movements, I wouldn't really know when we changed movements. It's all incredibly fluid. The one section, Festival Prep, is the one that stands out, as it has like 20 seconds of silence at the beginning of that track, and then it comes in incredibly quiet. I actually checked Deezer real quick to make sure it was still streaming the song because I thought something had gone wrong. There was nothing happening for a very long time. So that was an interesting moment, and it's the only time I think where there was a sharp stop. Well, not a sharp divide between two movements, where one found an ending, and then we've had a very noticeable start to the next. Most of the time, we fluidly moved between ideas. And I find that to be really interesting because to me it conveys something that feels entirely connected. I can't wait to get to the lyrics and see what the song is about. I don't really get too strong of a narrative from the different movements themselves and how they flow and all of this. That could be something I pick up on another listen. I'm not saying it isn't there. There is a lot of music to digest on this, and there's going to be a lot of stuff that I miss for sure. But to me, despite the transitions being smooth, I really didn't feel too much of a story being told throughout the emotions and atmospheres that I picked up on throughout this first time listen on it. I also don't know that I always picked up on ideas between atmospheres and movement titles. The fanfare at the beginning was absolutely a fanfare. It's brass, it's triumphant, it's bringing about your attention to something. That's pretty much what a fanfare is. It lasted for 30 seconds, and then we went into the betrayal, and this was full of staccato notes, very short, abrupt hits. And it's very bouncy, lots of bells in here. It was a fun betrayal. I don't know if it was supposed to be, but I kind of had a smile on my face during this section. It's fun, dude. I don't know why. That to me is not the feelings of betrayal. It is too fun and bouncy for that. And then at the end, we have a rising motif, just constantly raising up the pitches of a specific lick over and over, rising in volume two. We introduce a little bit of tension in here, and then there's victory. It's the penultimate section of the track, and it sounds triumphant of some sort. The energy winds down rather quickly, though, and we kind of end the track on something soft that felt negative, possibly a loss of something. Now, this could have been the betrayal. Maybe this whole song was about the naivety of a relationship or, whatever is being betrayed here. I kind of assume it's two people, but thinking everything's fine, and then there's darkness, and then you have been betrayed, and now you're feeling sad or disappointed or whatever that negative emotion is that wraps the song up on this very quiet, somber note, because movement 3 takes that and starts off incredibly soft before introducing the bass leading. And from here on out, the bass would lead pretty much every section of this track. We've introduced the vocalists. I love their harmonies. We introduced the choir. This whole section just sounds great. The melodies are infectious from the vocals. And I think it's interesting that the vocal melodies kind of are distinct. I wouldn't call them poppy, but they do feel more mainstream than the classical melodies we hear on the instrumental leads. I don't know if there is a division of roles in the composition where maybe one person is creating more of the rock style melodies or riffs or drum patterns, and someone else is writing the classical ones, but there is a very stark difference in how the vocal melodies are written versus how the oboe melodies or violin melodies or trumpet melodies are written throughout here. This is a track that feels dark, almost like it's continuing on some of those wavelengths of the betrayal section. It's kind of dark, maybe a type of I don't know, danger. It's also kind of sneaky at times too. That's not a word I typically use to describe music, but it does feel like there is information being withheld, something along those lines, and there's danger because of that. That's my best interpretation of it. We end on a nice piano ending, though, which is beautiful and graceful and sweeps us out of these lower atmospheres into a brighter emotion. Movement 4 is called Love Theme, and it is highly contrasty. I think it's the quietest section we have on the entire track, all the movements, but it does sweep up into this large moment at the end. It's kind of jazzy, but we enter into something more whimsical towards the end as we layer on horns and strings and woodwinds, and they begin to mimic, parallel, and contrast the piano melody that's been taking us through this entire thing. Towards the end, though, we begin to introduce a subtle bit of darkness, and this is the moment I kind of want to bring this idea up. This is the second time where we've started from one emotional flavor and have slowly slipped into another, whether it's because it is subtly introduced by an instrument, maybe something creating a bit of tension or brightness within an opposing atmosphere, where it's a solo instrument representing an opposing emotion, or if the song itself sweepingly moves from one idea to the next through a measured and calculated chord progression that deviates from what we've been exploring to help transition us into a new feeling. I don't know if these are supposed to be understood within the movements themselves or as transitional ideas, because they typically do happen at the beginnings and endings of movements. Everything in the middle of a movement is contained, it is measured, it is one idea for the most part. We might grow or shrink within that idea, but emotionally, we don't really see too much movement in the middle of movements. We don't see movement in the movements. Fantastic. English language, guys. But the beginnings and endings of movements tend to have more dynamic emotional writing. And I don't know if I should be reading this narratively or structurally as a compositional tool to move to other ideas, to help smooth over the transition from a love song into a story of a young prince and princess. I don't know. This next movement, though, is movement 5, Young Prince and Princess. We get some really cool piano, harp, feminine vocal trio here, and it is a wonderful start to this section. This one also brought about the most freeing part of the song to me. I described it as feeling like spring. It's very bright and green and hilly, and just wide open pieces of land. That's what I got out of this. We have a really big string uplift at the end, and it is just a gorgeous moment. And this leads us into the festival prep, which I've already talked about. I love this, dude. It starts off feeling very morning-like, very beginnings. It takes a long time to start, but once we get into that, it's just very fun, bouncy. The piano and the bass lead this section, and I still liken it to the opening number of Beauty and the Beast. It's just very bouncy and ensemble-y. Lots of things going off at once, contributing to this larger, noisy, cluttered sound without actually being noisy and cluttered itself. It has the illusion of a lot of moving pieces that are just somehow interlinking into a wonderful way that, the only way that a village can. So I love that. From here, we move into the fugue, and this is interesting because why a fugue? I mean, it is a traditional classical device here. It is the epitome of theme and variation. We heard the piano come in, it played its idea, it expanded upon its idea itself. We saw some harmonic alterations in the left hand. We saw some melodic alterations in the right hand, focusing still on several key notes to keep the core feeling of the melody there while expanding and going into all sorts of different directions. Musically, it might sound very different, but there are core elements that still relate where we are now versus where we were before, how we started all of this. We eventually bring in more instruments, not necessarily as instruments themselves, but in instrumental groups. The brass come in, the string come in, the woodwinds come in, and we end up seeing variation and expansion along those lines as well. I really loved this moment. I thought it was a great showcasing of a fugue. It did enter into a realm that pushed a little far into the transformation where I began to lose track of how where we were was related to how we started. This is not a bad thing. It just means it's more complex. We've listened to fugues by phenomenal classical composers in the past, and yeah, dude, some of the best composers can be very tricky. And being able to see how our current iteration matches the original template, it requires a lot of attention to minute details, and sheet music always helps with it. So I'm not going to say that we stopped being a fugue at any point. I'm going to assume that 70% into this track, we were still fuging. I don't think that's a word. But it's just that the the ties that bound these two ideas was becoming quite taut, almost to the point of snapping. There's just so much distance between these two. But it's what the best composers do. And if there's anything that I learned throughout this track, that it's whoever's composing for Renaissance is a classical nut, dude. I don't know if maybe they were trained in classical music first and then wanted to explore the realms of rock, but they have a really strong grasp on classical composition in general. So I'm just going to assume that they're fuguing really well, and I just can't catch the fugue the way that they're fuguing. That's the skill issue on my part. Yeah, that word's starting to sound really weird. Um, we got some rising intensity towards the end of this track. It's a nice feeling of finality towards the end of it, but it does sweep us into the festival, which is very groovy. I love this part of the track. It is kind of isolated in what it does. We don't see as much expansion or movement within the festival movement, and then it takes us to the finale, which is incredibly large. It's a big feeling. We have the choir back. We haven't heard them in 10 minutes at least. The brass is supporting all of this. We have the timpanis are back. All the instruments are here. We call back at least the atmosphere, if not specific ideas from Movement 3 Sultan. And it's just a very majestic finale with a strong resolution. Beautiful movement through all of this. But again, I can form a story from the titles. The music tends to feel like it describes the moment more so than trying to tell a story on its own, which is fairly common for older progressive rock. This is a thing that comes up often in bands like King Crimson and Genesis, where I find that the music's very important and does a great job of expressing the moment, but that the lyrics help push the story forward more than the music does. Although we don't have a lot of lyrics on this one either. Anyways, I think this is about gonna wrap this up. We'll head into the lyrics. I'm sold on this though. This is really well done, and I love a good classical work, which I think honestly that's how I would describe this. There's not a lot of rock here, but it does help that the bass and the drums lead most of these segments and that they can create some really groovy moments, which groove in classical isn't something I always experience. So I think that's one of those cool overlaps where we have all these neat layers going on in the classical composition, but we do have this awesome heartbeat at the core of the track that keeps it energetic and bouncy and honestly groovy. And that not only comes from, I think, rock composition, but from the rock instrumentation in this orchestra as well. All right, let me have some lyrics on this and see if I can't tie together all these things I heard into an understanding of what kind of story I'm being told here. All right. Seems that this is based off of a collection of Middle Eastern folk tales titled 1001 Nights. While the tales themselves may change in each collection, the frame story is consistent throughout all of them, in which a ruler, the Sultan, ends up finding out that his wife was unfaithful to him, so he decides to have a new wife every night and then kill them in the morning so that they can't betray him again. This leads to him, one of the women that he chooses is Scheherazade, and she keeps herself alive by beginning a story every night and not finishing it. Finishing it the next day and then starting another story. So instead of killing her, the Sultan is intrigued by the story and wants to hear it. And after 1001 nights, 1000 stories, the Sultan has discovered that he has fallen in love with Scheherazade, and instead of killing her, decides to make her a permanent queen and throws a big party for her. That's pretty much what we get here. I'm going to assume the betrayal then is a musical description of the initial betrayal, of feeling or finding out that his wife has been unfaithful to the Sultan. Number 3, the description of the Sultan. This kicks off the story here. The Sultan King, a cruel majesty, ordered that his women die a single night. This for all his wives, take his pleasure and then their lives. States that he'll have his wife for a day and in the morning they'll be slain. Verse 2, though, introduces Scheherazade. It says, her beauty shone like a flower grown, gentle as he'd ever known. The pre-chorus mentions that she bewitched him with songs of jeweled kings, princes, of heroes and eastern fantasies, told him tales of sultans and talismans and rings. 1001 nights she sang to entertain her king. That's pretty much taking the general story here and explaining it. We then have the love theme, which I'm going to assume is the Sultan falling in love with Scheherazade. We have the young prince and princess, which is a short story told by Scheherazade. It is pretty much exactly what it says. It's a prince declaring his love to a princess. It is completely isolated against the rest of this suite of tracks. Or a suite of movements, I should say. Movement 6, festival preparations. We're getting ready for a festival. The fugue comes after that, which is a fugue for the Sultan, so presumably just a performance for the Sultan. Then we have the festival. In here, presumably someone, maybe the Sultan, tells Scheherazade that this day is yours. The bearers of your gifts stand all around you. The finest silk is here. Today you have the Sultan's love and people watch you step into the sun. It just describes this big party, all of it for Scheherazade. The finale brings back the idea from from movement 3. She told him of tales of sultans and talismans and rings. 1001 nights she sang to entertain her king. Bringing back the core plot in this frame story here. So that probably explains why some of it's a bit disjointed, not necessarily in the transition of the songs, but how each idea kind of feels isolated and not part of a larger whole, because it does look at various portions of this story and at one point even dives into a story within the story. So yeah, it actually checks out really well, and I think it's impressive that so much of it does flow together despite the fact that we're not looking at a purposefully linear real-time depiction of this tale, that we are jumping around between different parts of it. Very well done overall, and I'm still really impressed by this. These are my thoughts on Scheherazade by Renaissance. Sorry, it's Song of Scheherazade by Renaissance. What did you think of this? Is there anything that stood out to you? Anything that you'd like to add on to what I said or correct me on? Do you have a different take, perspective, or opinion on this track? Please let me know. Put all of that and anything else you'd like to add into the comment section below. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. It takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all 3 of those. That wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow, though, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 p.m. UTC as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.